Good evening. May I request that we remain upstanding for the national anthem. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Vaal University of Technology Choir, and that was a great way to usher us into the proceedings tonight in true patriotic style. I could see that all of us, when we got to South Africa is going through quite a bit, and this is what necessitates evenings such as tonight. That wonderful rendition of the national anthem prepares us as we greet you in no particular order. Allow me to start with all of you, our dear friends, friends of the Walter Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice. President Kgalema Motlanthe, it is an honor to have you address us tonight. Dr. Lindiwe Sisulu, Professor Khetla Ndlovu, and I also wish to acknowledge the chairperson of the foundation in absentia, Dr. Alan Busak, the deputy chairperson, Dr. Badile Hotla, and Dade Mpumzi Mdekazi, who is the CEO of the foundation, and of course, all the esteemed guests who are gathered here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. A heartfelt welcome also from me. My name is Carol Lindiwe Bauer. I am the founder of African Odyssey, Motswako, which you used to watch for 22 years on SABC2, and the Mbogodo Awards. I also serve as a global luminary for the United Nations Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. Never has there been a time where peace has felt more precarious. So I urge all of us that we hold hands coming out of tonight to ensure that that which we hear tonight effects change in our communities and in the lives of South Africans. I am honored to spend this time with you as we work together to ponder salient questions about the future that we are going to bequeath future generations. This is the second annual Walter Sisulu Lecture, and it forms part of a national conversation structured around three pillars. One, the promise that rose, the freedom that was owed to the 1976 generation, the promise betrayed, and the debt we reclaim. And essentially what we're trying to do is to trace the arc from 1976 through to the present moment, and then all the way to the South Africa that we project in 2076. I'm giving away my age. If that has your mind piqued, then do join me as I introduce in his own house our gracious and most esteemed host of this year's lecture, and that's the Vaal University of Technology Vice-Chancellor, Professor Khehla Ndlovu. A warm welcome, please.
His Excellency, former President of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. Kgalema Motlanthe, Dr. Lindiwe Nongceba Sisulu, patron of the Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, Dr. Palile Lehohla, Deputy Chairperson of the Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, Mr. Mpumzi Mdekazi, Chief Executive Officer of the Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, members of the VUT Council present, Deputy Vice Chancellors, and members of the Executive Management, Walter and Albertina Sisulu Foundation friends, esteemed guests, colleagues, students, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, to our host, Ms. Carol Bauer, good evening. It is indeed a privilege to welcome you to the Vaal University of Technology for the second annual Walter Sisulu Memorial Lecture. We gather this evening to honor a giant of our liberation struggle, but also to confront a question that should trouble every one of us. What becomes of a nation when the future of its young people is steadily taken away from them? This year's theme, Stolen Tomorrows, is both powerful and unsettling. It speaks to young people whose aspirations are diminished by unemployment, poverty, inequality, corruption, violence, and unequal access to quality education. It speaks to the danger of a democracy in which freedom is formally guaranteed, yet opportunity remains out of reach for far too many. Mr. President, may I proceed? This year's theme, Stolen Tomorrows, is both powerful and unsettling. It speaks to young people whose aspirations are diminished by unemployment, poverty, inequality, corruption, violence, and unequal access to quality education. It speaks to the danger of a democracy in which freedom is formally guaranteed, yet opportunities remain out of reach for far too many. We must be honest, for many young South Africans, the future is not something they can plan for with confidence. It is something they might fight for every day. That reality places a profound responsibility on all of us, particularly institutions of higher learning. Universities cannot be content with producing qualifications alone. We must produce capable, ethical, and socially conscious graduates who understand that knowledge has a purpose beyond personal advancement. Knowledge must be used to widen opportunity, solve real problems, and restore the dignity of our people. Walter Sisulu's life offers an enduring lesson in precisely this kind of leadership. He understood that leadership is not about prominence. It is about service. It is about holding firm the principle when compromise is easier. It is about helping others rise even when one's own freedom, comfort, and safety are at stake. Walter Sisulu embodied courage, hope, and selfless service, values that South Africa needs urgently today. His connection to this region gives tonight's gathering special meaning. During the height of the struggle against apartheid, Walter Sisulu found sanctuary in Everton, within the Vaal Triangle, while evading the security police. This region was not merely a place of refuge. It was part of the story of his resilience, his organizing, and his vision for a free South Africa. It is therefore fitting that VUT, an institution rooted in the Vaal and committed to transforming lives through education, hosts this important conversation. A place that once offered refuge now becomes a space for reflection, intellectual engagement, and renewed commitment to social justice. As VUT marks 60 years of existence, we remain conscious of our responsibility to the communities we serve. For 6 decades, the university has opened pathways for the young people, many of whom are the first in their families to enter higher education. We have seen how higher education can alter the direction of a life-transformed family and strengthen a community. But we must also acknowledge that access without support is not enough, and that the qualification without meaningful opportunity is not the full promise of transformation. The work before us is to build a society in which talent is not wasted because of where a person was born, the school they attended, or the economic circumstances of their family. To our students, I want to say, your future matters. Your voice matters. Your ideas matter. You are not passengers in the journey of this country. You are its future leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, public servants, scientists, engineers, artists, and more importantly, change makers. The challenges before South Africa are great, but they are not beyond the imagination, resilience, and the collective power of its young people. Do not allow the failures around you to convince you that change is impossible. Do not accept injustice as normal. Walter Sisulu's generation did not inherit freedom. They organized for it, sacrificed for it, and believed in it, even when the path ahead seemed impossible. Your generation has its own calling. It is to defend the gains of democracy, to demand ethical leadership, to resist corruption, and to build an economy and society in which no young person's tomorrow is stolen by circumstances beyond their control. This is why our partnership with the Walter and Albertina Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice is so important. It affirms that ethical leadership must not remain an abstract idea. It must shape how we lead institutions, how we serve communities, and how we prepare the next generation. We are grateful to the Foundation for choosing VUT as a partner in this vital work. Together, we must create spaces where the difficult questions are asked, where truth is spoken, and where the values of justice, equality, and human dignity are translated into practical action. Your Excellency, former President Motlanthe, we are deeply honored by your presence this evening. Your life of service, political leadership, and commitment to democratic values lends special weight to this occasion. We look forward to your keynote address and to the wisdom you will share with our students, staff, and our guests. Ladies and gentlemen, may tonight be more than a memorial lecture. May it be a call to conscience. May it remind us that the legacy of Walter Sisulu does not belong only in history books, statutes, or commemorations. It belongs in how we lead, how we treat one another, how we determine we are to secure a better future for those who will come after us. Let us ensure that no child's dreams are deferred by poverty. No student's potential is limited by inequality, and no young person's tomorrow is stolen by the failures of today. Ngiyabonga, ngiyalibuka. I thank you.
Thank you so much, VC. I know that we all agree that that was just the tone that we needed to set for tonight and really just go back to the principles that truly defined Ntate Walter Sisulu and I dare say Lemme Albertina Sisulu. I believe that there are leaders who occupy positions and we just remember their names. And then there are leaders who carry a legacy. And those leaders leave us feeling transformed. So we don't just remember their names, we carry their names as we go forward. And truly, Ntate Sisulu has been that kind of leader. I love the fact that you invoked the spirit of humility that really defined him. And as I look around the room, I'm truly humbled to see that it is the students that are in this room. It is the young people from the community. May this continue. We can't continue to have these very, very important discussions and then have refrains such as nothing about us without us. We have got to have the people for whom we want to leave a better nation in the room, influencing the dialogue. Thank you so much for being here. Ntate Sisulu taught us that true leadership is measured not by power, but by service. Not by prominence, but by an unwavering commitment to justice, to dignity, and the advancement of humanity. This university advances those ideals. This foundation advances those ideals. Allow me, please, to welcome the CEO of the Walter Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, Ntate Mpumzi Ndekazi. Welcome, sir.
Program Director, Your Excellency, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, Deputy Chairperson of the Foundation, Professor Palli Hutle, Patron of the Foundation, Melindwe Sisulu, Vice Chancellor, Professor Ketlan Ndlovu, DVC, Professor Nelani. Last year, we were here for our inaugural memorial lecture that was delivered by our founding chairperson, Reverend Ellen Busak, who couldn't make it today. In that lecture, we made commitments that are emanating from our partnership with the University of Vaal, University of Technology. Key amongst those was to respond to the pedagogical deficiency and the ontological interest, the lack of ontological interest on Tata Walter Sisulu. When we met last year, we agreed that we're going to generate a lot of material. We're going to generate books, journals, research papers, to a point where the Vice-Chancellor offered us a competition on essays with specific reference to Walter Sisulu's ethical leadership paradigm. Patron, I'm here to report to say those things are underway. The Vice-Chancellor is here, the DVC is here. That work is underway. That work is continuing. We are here to revive, to restore, and preserve Walter Sisulu's legacy, because Walter Sisulu's legacy has been submerged by the people who have benefited from his legacy and his leadership. We're here to extract that legacy from suppression by dovetailing that legacy into intellectual spaces such as this university and many other universities that we are working with. We are working with University of Cape Town. We are starting to work with the VUT University as well to deal precisely with Mama Albertina Sisulu and deal with issues of gender-based violence and deal with issues of poverty. It's difficult to evade and avoid the debate around poverty. Students, I'm told, they at times go to bed hungry, and they are expected to produce the following days, submit assignments, submit theses, submit proposals. There's a serious imbalance there. There's a serious imbalance there. We can't. The deputy chairperson of the foundation, in one of our programs, is leading what we call Lehutla Leisure. It's a democratic barometer. It's a democracy barometer, which is going to be very, very unpopular. Because we've got to gauge what we have achieved from 1994 versus the socio-economic conditions that we are living in today. Now, in a stroke of a button in your phone, if you want a forensic evaluation of your village or your township, Sis Carol, ubuya kuphi Soweto? If you want a forensic profile of Rockville, which is an innovation that is going to come through this foundation, you're going to press your phone and say Rockville, service delivered. We are guiding you so that you can be able, when you make or decide who to vote for, you don't blame other people after that vote. We're going to enable you, if you're coming from Ekutubeni, where Tata Walter was born, or Ekolobeni, where Mama Albertina was born, you're going to click there in your phone and press water or press road. If there isn't, don't blame anyone, because we're going to give you just before your elections so that you make up your decision. That's our contribution to deepen our democracy as part of this foundation. So, we are recognizing this day not merely as part of historical reflection, but to reposition Walter's legacy as a strategic national asset that defines, as Prof said, national consciousness, territorial consciousness, cultural erasure, and intergenerational healing. This is a wounded generation, MC. Dr. Walter Sisulu bequeathed a very intact, effective machinery to liberate the people of this country to the generation of the president. That generation of the president, of former president, is struggling to bequeath that very same effective machinery to liberate these kids. The question is why? A journalist is asking me outside, so how do you define this ethical leadership? I'm saying it's to lead without expecting anything in return. May we continue with Walter Sisulu and Albertina's spiritual continuity, their values. May we, Deputy Chairperson, with your weight, Tate Palile Hutla, with this foundation, deliver economic power to these kids. Dr. Walter Sisulu found sanctuary here before he was arrested. The first thing he could understand, he could secure for himself, was land here in Everton. That is why we're here. We are trying to retrace his footprint. Together with our partnership with Vaal University of Technology, it seems as if we are succeeding. Signs are there. Because that land must translate into economic power. If it's just a land without economic power, then we may as well not have it. So, in us trying to extract his legacy, former president, we have partnered with many universities. There's a university in the US, they call it Texas Southern University. We were linked with that university by a staff member of this university, of Vaal University of Technology. With that university, we are trying to develop what I would term as Walter Sisulu's ethical leadership theory, so that his life get into the intellectual textbooks. It forms part of theory that seeks to find solutions. With Walter Sisulu University, we have fielded to them. They are embracing us. We want to embark on what we call Walter Sisulu infrastructural development, because it should talk to the infrastructural challenges for the people of the Eastern Cape. Whereas the foundation, we target schools that are vandalized and those that are closed, and turn them into satellite university campuses, extensions of Walter Sisulu University. Okay, I can see you're looking at your time.
No, not at all.
We are revisiting the Rivonia trial with specific reference to accused number 2, especially his intellectual wrestling with Percy Yuta, the then prosecutor in the Rivonia trial. The judges at the time, they wanted to hang them. Maybe Tony Leon's father was a judge, I'm told. Tony Leon, the one that we are working with today. His father sat on the bench that sought to hang Walter Sisulu. And then when they got a life sentence, the books that I've came across are explaining his first 2 years in Robben Island as follows. He couldn't sleep, not because of the sentence or the conditions. For 2 years, he couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep because he didn't understand how Persecutor beated him. He was targeted because he was the least educated in that group, and he was an engine of the organization at the time. He was the Secretary General, so all the books, infrastructure, everything was with him. So they targeted him. Former president will know it better than me. So, mistakenly so thinking that he's going to crack, he managed to deliver a life sentence for his comrades rather than hang pal met the Africans. He then exclaimed, "Gents, we got a discharge." So what is a discharge? It's a life sentence. How can a discharge be a life sentence? I mean, how can a life sentence be a discharge? As I'm landing, we are partnering also with sports federations. We just had our partnership with South African Rugby Football Union. It was very ironical that they agreed. It's a white sport. They've agreed to work with us. They were inspired by Walter's leadership qualities, helping us to unearth that legacy, those leadership qualities, together with Umama Albertine. Well, I was approached by Boxing South Africa. Their COO, I think, is here. They want to come with one of the prestigious belts to be named after Walter Sisulu. They want to launch it. I'm told they were talking to Sugar Ray Leonard to come and launch that belt here. Now, I'm landing Patron and the President. And I'm asking myself, how are we going to liberate people that were able to buy? You can't liberate somebody that you've made him a commodity. How are we going to liberate our people if at times we are prepared to buy them as political leaders? How are you going to liberate something that is in your hand that you can, at a flip of a bank account, you can switch a few thousands to his direction? How are you going to liberate that person when you commodify that person? Let me leave it there.
Salient question. A gentleman from England landed in South Africa a few years ago. I live in Cape Town. He landed in Cape Town with this beautiful, beautiful new bride. His plan was to end her life. Her plan was to have a great honeymoon. This gentleman, within 15 minutes of arrival, had managed to find a South African he could buy to end this young woman's life. Why is it so easy to buy us? Why is there a price that people can just place on your head and say, no, Carol will do it for that. Mpumzi will do it for that. You are going to come out of this institution educated, powerful, full of bright ideas on what you're going to be doing to transform a world that clearly was never ready for educated Africans. Please have no price. Let no one be able to do what the CEO just told us one can do in our nation. Too many have bought us. Someone sits in a house in one of our townships and they're printing passports, and they don't realize in doing that to get 2,000 rand, 5,000 rand for that particular weekend to go and have champagne, to go and party. What they're doing is that they're selling our nation one passport, one fake passport at a time. Our biggest problem is the fact that, yes, we are led by people who are not deserving of having been given the legacy of a Walter Sisulu, a Nelson Mandela, and Oliver Tambo. But what are you going to do to change that? Clearly, our generation has failed, and we're looking to you for great partnership. Thank you so much for that incredible overview, CEO. Our next item is meant to be, thank you. Our next item is meant to be the choir. Is the choir going to be, Mpumzi, is that still happening? All right, fantastic. Please let us put our hands together for the Vaal University of Technology Choir as they give us an item. I'm saying Tato more, yeah. I think we need more, right? Bazobuya futi. You know, when I learned that former president, it's hard for me to say former, but former President Kgalema Motlanthe would be addressing the lecture this year, would be giving us the keynote address, I booked my ticket immediately. Of course, it was because I wanted to see you, my sister, but very, very excited to have this keynote address. And I cannot think of a more appropriate person to come up here and fully introduce a president who's been called a safe pair of hands, one of the most trusted leaders of our time, our Vice Chancellor of the Vaal University of Technology. Please come and do the honors for us. Please come and introduce our president. Sorry, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, you can tell I'm excited. Our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nelana.
Good evening. Good evening. It's my honor to stand in front of you. I would like to acknowledge our former president, His Excellency, Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, the patron of the foundation, Dr. Walter Sisulu, the deputy chairperson, Dr. Padili Lihotla, and former the founding chairman, Professor Alan Pusak, and also acknowledge my Vice Chancellor, Professor Kehla Ndlovu, the members of management of the university, members of council that are here, members of the labor unions, students, staff members, all protocol observed, and also distinguished guests. Ndimele apha ukunika amagqabantshintshi ngobomi buka president, former president Kgalema Petrus Motlanthe. It's a long profile. I'm sure you are all eager to hear the real reason we're here, the speech. So I'll try my best. My name is Speech, by the way. So I won't make it long. I will really do amagqabantshintshi, snippets about his profile. But I hope, former president, I don't leave out important bits. You will forgive me. Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe's profile outlines the integrity and the confidence that is respected for. As the self-effacing leader that world has come to know. Mr. Motlanthe's profile is characterized by his rise as a leader. He was the first chairperson of the National Congress, most important and powerful Gauteng region in 1990, at a time when the ANC was re-establishing itself in the country. In 1992, he was elected acting general secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, then the most powerful trade union, not only in South Africa, but on the African continent. He was formally elected East General Secretary at NUM's 1994 conference. In 1997, Mr. Motlanthe succeeded Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, the current president of the Republic of South Africa, as the ANC, at the ANC conference in Mafeking as its Secretary General. After its president, Mr. Nelson Mandela, Dr. Nelson Mandela, Mr. Walter Sisulu, and other senior leaders persuaded Mr. Motlanthe to accept that position and for the NUM to release him for that purpose. He was re-elected Secretary General at the 2002 Stellenbosch Conference, position he held until the ANC Polokwane Conference in 2007, when he became the ANC Deputy President. In 2008, he was elected as an MP, and in July, he became the Minister in the Presidency. 2 months later, in September 2008, he was elected the President by the Parliament of South Africa. Maybe going back to where he comes from, his profile. President Kgalema Petrus Motlanthe was born to a working-class family on the 19th of July 1949 in Alexandra Township, Johannesburg, South Africa. Mr. Motlanthe fought against the injustices of the Nationalist Party system of apartheid-based racial discrimination of the African population. On the 14th of April 1976, Mr. Motlanthe was arrested for furthering the aims of the African National Congress by undergoing military training and being caught in possession of explosives. He was kept in detention for 11 months at the John Foster Square police station in central Johannesburg. In 1997, he was found guilty on 3 charges under the Terrorism Act, which prescribed 5 years minimum sentence per count, and was sentenced to an effective 10 years imprisonment on Robben Island prison. After his release in 1987, Mr. Motlanthe was tasked with strengthening the trade union movement in the country. To this end, he worked for the National Union of Mine Workers as a national coordinator responsible for education and was later elected as its general secretary. In 1990, when the banning of the ANC and other political organizations was lifted, Mr. Motlanthe was tasked with re-establishing the legal structure of the ANC in the Gauteng province. Mr. Motlanthe served 2 5-year terms as Secretary General of the ANC from December 1997 to December 2007. As Secretary General, he was responsible for the overall operations of the organization and ensuring all its structures functioned well. Mr. Motlanthe was the Deputy President of the National Congress during the period 2007 to 2012 and was also Minister in the Presidency from July to September 2008, subsequently elected President as I indicated earlier, serving until 9th May 2009. Motlanthe is actively continuing to serve the development of communities and society at large. He serves as the trustee in the following organizations and foundations, amongst others: the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Armed Katrada Foundation, the Lilies Leaf Museum Trust, the Institute for African Alternatives, and the Brazzaville Foundation. He also serves as a commissioner in the Global Commission on Drug Policy. He's a founding chair of the Eastern and Southern Africa Commission of Drugs, ESACD. The former president also serves in the structure of former heads of state and governments of Africa and champions of HIV-free Africa. In 2003, as I skipped most of the aspect, like I said, as I was the one to hear what he has to tell us today. In 2023, the former president formed part of the high-level delegation in Dubai, UAE, for the Arab Bank of Economic Development in Africa, BADEA, with African and Arab leaders from the public and private sectors, members of the United Nations, UN, NGOs, and civil society on the topic, Forging Arab-Africa Partnership for Recovery, Resilience and Sustainable Development. In 2023, former president was appointed as the founding chair of the Eastern and African Commission on Drugs, a high-level advocacy mechanism that aims at bringing to the regional framework an informed science-based discussion about humane and effective drug policies. I have to mention that Mr. Motlanthe is married to Mrs. Gugu Pizet Motlanthe. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you our speaker for tonight, our former president, His Excellency Kgalema Motlanthe.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for your kind words of introduction. in the past, in certain occasions, I've been honored with listening to my obituary. In one of them, the person who was supposed to introduce me even said, may his soul rest in eternal peace. So I want to thank you for that. Yes. Program Director, Ms. Carol Lindiwe Bauer, the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Vaal University of Technology, Professor Ketla Ndlovu, leaders of the Walter and Albertina Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, the patron Lindiwe Noneba Sisulu, the Vice Chair of the Walter and Albertina Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, Dr. Padile Otla. Allow me to stand on the protocol already established by our program director. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to deliver this reflection as part of the second annual Walter Sisulu Lecture. This occasion assumes particular significance in a year that marks 50 years since the Soweto uprising of 16th of June, 1976, the 40th anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and the 1946 mine workers' strike, among others. Anniversaries are not merely dates by which societies measure the passage of time. They are moments in which the past returns to measure us. They compel us to ask whether the sacrifices of earlier generations have been translated into institutions, relationships, and forms of public life worthy of their courage. The conjunction of Walter Sisulu's life and the 50th anniversary of the Soweto uprising reveals a profound dialectical relationship between inheritance and invention. Each generation receives a moral inheritance from those who came before it. Yet, no generation simply reproduces the past. It must give inherited principles a form appropriate to the conditions of its own time. For instance, the students of 1976 did not inherit a completed struggle. They inherited a political tradition, a language of resistance, and an unfinished responsibility. The same obligation now falls upon the young people of the present. To remember Walter Sisulu is to confront this paradox. He was shaped by a history he did not choose, yet he became one of those rare individuals through whom history altered its direction. He was both a product and creator of history. A memorial lecture must hold these two truths together. If we present Sisulu only as a product of his circumstances, we diminish his agency. If we present him only as an exceptional hero, detached from the movements, relationships, and institutions that sustained him, we distort the meaning of his leadership. The purpose of remembrance is therefore not to sanctify. Hagiography places its subject beyond judgment, and in doing so removes that person from the human world of uncertainty, disagreement, and difficult choice. Walter Sisulu does not need to be rescued from history. His stature becomes clearer when we return him to history, to changing circumstances, contested strategies, political risk, moral responsibility, and consequences that could never be known in advance. I shall therefore not attempt to recount his life chronologically from birth to death. Instead, I propose that we read his life through 3 philosophical propositions. These propositions allow us to understand Walter Sisulu not merely as a participant in the struggle against apartheid, but as a thinker in action, a person whose philosophy was expressed less through formal treatises than through the character of his leadership, the relationships he cultivated, and the consequences he was prepared to bear. Walter Sisulu was born on the 18th of May, 1912, in the same year in which the South African Native National Congress, later the African National Congress, was founded. His birth came 2 years after the formation of the Union of South Africa and 1 year before the passage of the Natives Land Act of 1913. These dates do not suggest that history had predetermined his life. They establish, rather, the political world into which he entered. The Union proclaimed the political unification of South Africa while excluding the African majority from the main body politic. The Land Act did not begin the long process of dispossession, but it consolidated and legalized an older colonial practice by severely restricting African access to land. Visible conquest was increasingly supplemented by administration, classification, and law. The violence of dispossession acquired the language of orderly government. Sisulu therefore entered a society in which an African could be indigenous to the land and yet treated as an outsider within its political community. This was one of colonialism's central contradictions, which is that those most deeply rooted in the country were rendered politically alien within it. Yet, oppressive conditions do not mechanically produce a Walter Sisulu, because to some, the same conditions may produce submission, adaptation, despair, or rebellion. The philosophical significance of Sisulu's life lies not only in what history did to him, but in the manner in which he responded to what history placed before him. Frantz Fanon helps us understand that colonialism is not simply the seizure of territory or the control of labor. It also attempts to reorganize the psychological and moral world of the colonized. It seeks to persuade the oppressed that their social position reflects their natural worth. Steve Biko, who later insists that political liberation must therefore include the recovery of self-definition. A people cannot become free while continuing to see themselves through categories imposed by those who dominate them. Sisulu's life may be read as a practical expression of this struggle for human dignity. His movement from the rural Eastern Cape to Johannesburg brought him into direct contact with the exploitation of black workers and the severe limitations imposed upon African advancement. He worked in the mines, factories, bakeries, and even rendered domestic service. Yet, Johannesburg also introduced him to an emerging world of workers, intellectuals, professionals, and political organizers. His work as a real estate agent is significant in this regard. In a society in which property ownership was closely connected to social standing, independence, and citizenship, assisting black families to secure homes was more than an ordinary commercial activity. It placed Sisulu at the intersection of material aspiration and racial exclusion. The deeper point, however, is that he did not treat his own advancement as an escape from the collective condition. The relationships generated through his work became part of a wider political network. Personal achievement was converted into public responsibility. Under conditions of oppression, individual success may become either a retreat from collective struggle or a resource placed at its service. Sisulu chose the latter. He refused both the humiliation prescribed by white supremacy and the seduction of private exception. He would not accept the proposition that his own progress was sufficient while the majority remained excluded. This definition of virtue provides a useful lens through which to understand this dimension of Sisulu's life. Virtue is not a temporary emotion or an isolated act of heroism. It is a settled disposition cultivated through repeated action and guided by practical judgment. Courage, in this understanding, is not simply the willingness to encounter danger. It is the disciplined capacity to face danger for a worthy purpose in an appropriate manner and with an awareness of what is at stake. Sisulu's courage was of this kind. It was cumulative rather than theatrical. It was visible in the patient work of organizing meetings, recruiting members, maintaining communication, resolving disagreements, and carrying collective decisions into practice. It appeared in his willingness to accept restrictions, arrest, and imprisonment, but also in his willingness to listen, to reconsider his views, and to preserve unity among people of sometimes competing convictions. He joined the African National Congress in 1940, encountered many black intellectuals and professionals in Johannesburg who helped establish the ANC Youth League in 1944. He became Secretary General of the African National Congress in 1949 as the Youth League's program of action moved the organization towards mass mobilization and more assertive resistance. The historical significance of these developments is well established. Their philosophical significance deserves equal attention. Public memory is often attracted to the most visible leader, the commanding speaker, the dramatic gesture or the person who comes to symbolize an entire movement. Institutions, however, are frequently built by another kind of leadership, the organizer who connects people, recognizes ability in others, creates opportunities for their development, and ensures that individual talent becomes collective capacity. Sisulu's leadership did not consist in the absence of ambition, conviction, or pride. No serious political leader is without these qualities. His achievement was that he governed the self rather than allowing the self to govern the movement. His relationship with young intellectuals and professionals illustrates this quality. Sisulu recognized political potential and created an influential network of thinkers and activists and contributed to their political development. Yet their relationship was not one of uncritical agreement. It was sustained through discussion, disagreement, correction, and mutual respect. The same may be said of some of his prominent relationships with Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Anton Lombede, Duma Nokwe, Ahmed Kathrada, Yusuf Kachalia, Ntu Mukhehle, Dr. Diliza Mji, Eskia Mphahlele, Zephania Mutupeng, and many others. These were not merely associations with individuals who would later become famous. They reveal a philosophy of leadership. Sisulu became significant partly because he possessed the judgment to recognize significance in others. Madiba always emphasized that Sisulu led them from behind. This may be one of his most enduring lessons for political organization, that is, leadership reaches its highest form not when it produces followers, but when it produces other leaders. Nor can Walter Sisulu be understood apart from Albertina Sisulu. Yet Albertina Sisulu never presented merely as a supporting figure in Walter's political biography. She was a leader and political actor in her own right. She endured banning orders, detention, harassment, separation, and the burdens imposed upon families by political persecution. She remained a source of strength, not only to her family, but to a wider movement. Her family, who in its entirety, including the children, became involved in the struggle. Their partnership demonstrates that solidarity within the family and solidarity within the political community need not be separate moral worlds. Their home became a place of political formation, refuge, and human connection in a society designed to fragment Black life. Sisulu's greatness was relational. His leadership enlarged the capacities of others. His dignity was expressed not through distance from the people, but through responsibility towards them. Sisulu had a distinctive political gift. Walter Sisulu knew how to lead in the dark from moment to moment, knowing just where the spark is and just how strong it must be struck. He understood that real work is the work that no one sees and earns no remark. He possessed the ability to convert private grievance into collective purpose. Millions of people experienced the indignities of racial domination, but indignation, however morally justified, does not automatically become political power. Anger must acquire discipline, language, strategy, and organizational form. Sisulu understood that organization was the bridge between suffering and agency. This understanding formed the work of the ANC Youth League and the Program of Action. The Youth League insisted that Africans should cease being treated as junior participants in their own liberation. It sought to transform the ANC from an organization centered largely upon petitions and deputations into a mass movement capable of disciplined mobilization. Thus, the 1952 Defiance of Unjust Law campaigns illustrated this proposition. The campaign was significant not because isolated individuals broke unjust laws impulsively, but because thousands of volunteers acted together in a coordinated and disciplined manner. Their collective action exposed the distinction between legality and legitimacy. The apartheid state possessed the authority to enact laws, but the volunteers asserted that the power to legislate did not automatically confer moral legitimacy upon laws designed to degrade human beings. Through disciplined defiance, people who had been treated merely as subjects of administration appeared as political agents capable of judgment. The same principle informed the Congress of the People campaign that culminated in the adoption of the Freedom Charter in 1955. The Charter was more than a collection of demands and aspirations. It advanced a philosophical claim about political authorship. People who had been spoken for insisted upon speaking. People who had been governed without consent asserted their right to govern. People who had been classified as objects of policy declared themselves to be the authors of a democratic future. Sisulu's developing commitment to non-racialism must be understood within that context. He came to understand more fully that the restoration of African dignity and the creation of a non-racial democracy were not contradictory projects. At its most principled, Sisulu's non-racialism demanded the reconstruction of the political order itself. Sisulu's leadership enlarged the moral community of the struggle while retaining its foundation in the agency of the oppressed. This required more than tolerance. It required the difficult political virtue of learning without surrendering oneself, changing without abandoning one's ethical purpose, and forming alliances without dissolving the historical reality of oppression. The most demanding philosophical question in Sisulu's life arose when the apartheid state progressively closed the space for lawful political activity. The Sharpeville massacre of March 21st, 1960, the banning of the ANC and the Pan-Africanist Congress, mass arrests, restrictions, and the intensification of state repression fundamentally altered the terrain of struggle. The liberation movement confronted a state that used law not merely to regulate political disagreements, but to prevent the majority from participating in political life at all. Fanon, approaching the question from a different philosophical position, compels us to recognize that the colonial society is already structured by violence. The apparent peace of colonial rule is sustained through dispossession, coercion, and systematic denial of human agency. The liberation movement's decision to establish Umkhonto weSizwe was made within that context. The initial strategy concentrated on sabotage against state installations and sought to avoid the loss of life. Yet the decision opened a new and dangerous phase of struggle. and those who made it were obliged to accept responsibility for its possible consequences. This is the relationship between constraint and moral responsibility. The closure of peaceful political space narrowed the choices available to the liberation movement, but constrained choice remained choice. Oppression helped to explain the decision. It did not eliminate the obligation to judge, to limit harm, and to account for consequences. In this connection, Walter Sisulu did not present himself as an innocent bystander carried helplessly by historical forces. During the Rivonia trial, he used the witness box to explain the political conditions that had produced resistance and to accept responsibility for his own participation. During several days of cross-examination, he remained composed under sustained pressure. He refused to abandon his convictions, to implicate others, or to accept the premise that Africans should regard white domination as natural or lawful. The Rivonia trial placed Sisulu and his comrades under the shadow of the gallows. The state did not merely seek to imprison them. It possessed the power to execute them and hoped, through their removal, to decapitate the liberation movement. It was under these circumstances that the resolve to go to the gallows singing required its profound moral meaning. This is aptly captured in a letter written by the late Advocate Bram Fischer, the lead counsel in the Rivonia trial at that time. And I want to quote that. I quote, "I must tell you of one important event. Some days before the end of argument in court, Gavin, Walter, and Nelson came to an early morning consultation to tell us of a decision they had taken with regard to the sentence if it turned out to be capital punishment. They had made up their minds that in that event, there was to be no appeal. Their line was that should a death sentence be passed upon them, the political campaign around such a sentence should not be hampered by an appeal for mercy or by raising vain hopes. And Bram Fischer says, we lawyers were staggered at first, but soon realized the decision was politically unassailable. And he says, but I tell you the story not because of its political wisdom. I want you to know to what incredibly brave men you and others will have to be successors." Close quote. Their willingness to face death with dignity reversed the moral relationship between judge and accused. The state placed them on trial for violating its laws. They placed the state itself before the conscience of humanity. The court sentenced Sisulu and his comrades to life imprisonment on the 12th of June 1964. The regime believed that Robben Island would remove them from history. Instead, their imprisonment exposed the moral legitimacy of the system, contributed to international solidarity, and became part of the political inheritance that latter generations including the generation of 1976, would interpret in their own ways. Sisulu's courage was therefore not simply the capacity to endure isolation, pain, deprivation, and danger. It was the capacity to preserve moral agency when coercive power attempted to reduce the field of human choice to either submission or death. As it were, prison was intended to transform political agents into forgotten numbers. This posed a severe philosophical question: can political virtue survive when action is restricted, public recognition disappears, and freedom seems indefinitely postponed? Sisulu's conduct during more than 25 years of imprisonment suggests that leadership is not dependent upon office or visibility or applause. Robben Island was a place of deprivation, isolation, forced separation, and calculated humiliation. The prisoners were removed from their families, their organizations, and communities. Albertina Sisulu and other family members carried burdens that political histories have too often treated as secondary. Yet the prisoners refused to allow incarceration to possess the final authority over the meaning of their lives. They transformed confinement into a space of study, debate, political education, and mutual discipline. They read, taught one another, reconsidered strategies, mediated disagreements, and prepared themselves intellectually for a future they could not be certain they would live to see. Education, in this sense, is not the mechanical accumulation of information. It is a cultivation of the capacity to read the world critically, to recognize the forces that shape one's circumstances, and to act upon those circumstances with others. This insight helps us understand the relationship between Sisulu's generation and the generation of 1976. The Soweto uprising was not simply a repetition of an earlier script. The students possessed their own leaders, organizations, language, and political imagination. They acted against Bantu education, the imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction, and an entire system that sought to determine both what black children could learn and what they were permitted to become. When the students marched on the 16th of June, 1976, they did not merely reject language policy. They rejected an educational order designed to reproduce subordination. Their struggle affirmed that education is never politically neutral when a society is structured by domination. This distinction is equally important for the young people of the present. History should not be used as a weapon with which one generation humiliates another. To ask why young people today do not reproduce the precise forms of resistance associated with 1976 is to misunderstand historical responsibility. Each generation encounters a different configuration of power and must discover forms of courage appropriate to its own circumstances. The obligation of the present generation is not to march into precisely the same streets, confront the same police formations, or speak in exactly the same political vocabulary. It is to identify where human dignity is presently denied, where agency is constrained, and where institutions no longer serve the public good, and where collective action is required. Young people today confront a society marked by persistent inequality, unemployment, institutional distrust, and social fragmentation. They inhabit a technological world that offers unprecedented access to knowledge while also enabling manipulation, isolation, and rapid circulation of falsehood. Their task is not simply to express frustration, but to convert frustration into ethical and organized action. This is where Sisulu's example remains indispensable. As James Baldwin in his book, The Fire Next Time, states, and I quote, "It demands great spiritual resilience not to hate the hater whose foot is on your neck, and an even greater miracle of perception and charity not to teach your child to hate," close quote. Because no progressive cause is ever inspired by hate. So as I conclude, Walter Sisulu was released from prison in October 1989. He was elected Deputy President of the African National Congress in 1991, and as in his own terms, he said he slowed down from senior leadership positions in 1994. Walter Sisulu never accepted retirement. He always described it as a slowing down. Equally, he never accepted that he is not a youth. He will always, even when he was in the late 80s, he would always insist that he has merely accumulated more youth than others. After decades of exclusion from political power, he did not treat public office as personal compensation for suffering. This final dimension of his life returns us to the meaning of virtue. A leader's relationship to power after victory often reveals the character of the principle proclaimed during struggle. It is easier to speak of service while excluded from office than to practice restraint once office becomes available. Sisulu understood political leadership as stewardship rather than possession. Authority was justified only to the extent that it remained connected to the purposes for which people had struggled. Political suffering may confer moral authority, but it does not create a permanent entitlement to govern. A liberation movement honors its history not by claiming exemption from accountability, but by subjecting itself to the ethical standards that gave the struggle legitimacy. Sisulu's example invites us to ask whether leadership remains connected to service once political power has been attained. Do our institutions restore the dignity and agency of the people they serve? Does leadership create active citizens, or does it cultivate dependency? Do political organizations develop judgment and initiative, or do they reward silence and obedience? Do we use the history of struggle to deepen accountability or to protect the present from criticism? Does our invocation of unity make room for principled disagreement? Are we capable of revising our methods without surrendering our ethical purpose? And do those who occupy positions of authority understand that public office is held in trust rather than owned as a reward? These questions bring the philosophical traditions considered in this lecture into a common conversation. Sisulu's life brings these propositions together in a single moral argument. Freedom is not merely the removal of oppressive government. It is the creation of social, political, and human relationships in which people can become authors of their common life. Freedom means recognition of necessity. Freedom is therefore not a possession secured once and for all. It is a practice. Walter Sisulu's life cannot be reduced to a sequence of dates, campaigns, trials, and prison sentences. Its meaning lies in the moral relationship among those events. His experience of racial exclusion became a commitment to human dignity. His personal advancement became a resource for collective organization. His African nationalism developed into a non-racial vision without abandoning African agency. His courage was disciplined by responsibility. His imprisonment became a test of character rather than the termination of political meaning. His release did not become a claim to personal reward. To memorialize Sisulu is therefore not to place him beyond criticism. It is to recover the seriousness with which he confronted political choice. He did not possess perfect knowledge. He acted under conditions of uncertainty. He changed his views, learned through relationships, confronted disagreement, and accepted responsibility for decisions whose outcomes could not be guaranteed. That is precisely what makes his life to be a remarkable example. History does not produce heroes according to a timetable. It produces circumstances in which ordinary human beings must decide whether they will remain spectators, beneficiaries, or agents. Through habits of courage, judgment, discipline, and solidarity, some become equal to the demands of their time. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to allow fear to become the author of one's decisions. 50 years after June 16, the question is whether the present generation can assume authorship of the future. Every generation enters history in the middle of an unfinished sentence. Sisulu's part of that sentence was written through dispossession, organization, sacrifice, prison, and the achievement of democracy. Ours begins where his ended. Therefore, the most meaningful tribute we can offer him It's not repetition, but continuation. Not the mechanical repetition of historical forms, but the continuation of an ethical purpose. That purpose is to restore dignity where it is denied, to build collective power without extinguishing individual judgment, to place knowledge in the service of humanity, and to ensure that the struggle for freedom does not reproduce the dehumanization it seeks to overcome. Memory is not a debt discharged through praise. It is a responsibility assumed through conduct. Walter Sisulu remains, in this sense, more than a figure to be remembered. He remains a measure by which we may ask whether our institutions are just, whether our leadership is ethical, whether our education is liberating, and whether we ourselves have learned how to be free. And I thank you. Amandla.
Thank you wholeheartedly, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, for those kind and poignant words. It's a kind nudge that you've just given us towards taking the baton and really doing what is right for this generation. We cannot have that and not have a response that allows us to really allow what the President has shared with us to ruminate. Now, Walter Sisulu believed that every generation must produce men and women who are prepared not only to speak truth to power, but to speak truth in the service of justice. Dr. Badili Hotla is one of South Africa's most respected public intellectuals and an unwavering champion of evidence-based leadership. Social justice, of course, is at the core of who we know him to be, and ethical governance matters to him. As Deputy Chairperson of the Walter Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, he brings a lifetime of distinguished service, from leading Statistics South Africa to shaping national, continental, and international conversations on democracy, on development, and human dignity. His voice continues to inspire thoughtful leadership rooted in the values that Ntate Sisulu, Limme Sisulu, so courageously embodied. It is a privilege for me to stand before you now to welcome Ntate Badili Hotla to respond to the thought-provoking keynote address by former President Kgalema Motlanthe.
Thank you very much, Carol. After such a powerful rendition by President Motlanthe, who am I to try and interpret what he said? President Kgalema Motlanthe, Melindi Sisulu, the patron, the Vice Chancellor and DVC, fellow students and learners gathered here, let me greet you and seek assistance from you to interpret what President Motlanthe has rendered to us, rendering a piece of Walter Sisulu and a piece of Albertina Sisulu, one piece at a time. In 1944, Walter Sisulu and his counterparts were seated with Lembede, Anton Lembede. Lembede was 36 years old. He was the president of the Youth League of the ESC. 3 years later, he had perished. But in that seminal meeting of 1944, all those who gathered there, including Mekuzwayo, said, freedom in our lifetime. And all of them, without exception, including O.R. Tambo, were back in South Africa to witness the beginnings of freedom. O.R. perished before 1994, but he was back in South Africa to witness that. Such enduring commitment to freedom, such an enduring commitment to one who leads and dies only 3 years later, requires a mind and the nerves of steel. And Walter Sisulu was one such with the nerves of steel. The question that we should confront ourselves as the youth of 2026, who receive a baton from the youth of 1976, the question we have to ask is, do you have the nerves of steel, the courage, the collective purpose, the determination to survive humiliation rather, to survive adversity, and in the end, agree that freedom in your lifetime. South Africa today faces what we never anticipated it to face when in 1994 we took the oath of freedom in our lifetime. We couldn't anticipate that we'll be where we are. But here we are today, and that is why the leadership of Ndade Sisulu and the leadership of Me Albertina Sisulu is required. What would Walter Sisulu, what would Me Albertina Sisulu say when we are in this kind of circumstance, where we are facing a specter that is so difficult, so serious? And perhaps I should throw a few statistics for you to understand the perilous situation that we are facing at the moment. Amongst ourselves, those who have been born from probably the 60s, more importantly around the 70s and 80s, 66% of us don't have the name of the father on our birth certificate. This is a serious challenge for generational value creation. We inherit patrilineally, but there is no connection for 66% of us to that patrilineal relationship. It is therefore not surprising that 32 years into democracy, blacks, only 13% of them are in the top quintile, against 40% amongst Indians in the top quintile of income, and 77% of whites. Because part of the wealth, part of the inheritance comes from the family. But when 66% are excluded from following into that cumulative progress, then we are a nation that requires the question, what would have Ndade Walter Sisulu said, and what would have Me Albertina Sisulu said? One of the difficult and most difficult policy environments and policy paradoxes, amongst other things, is the NSFAS policy. It argues about joint income when there is no jointness. The question is, what is this joint income? That requirement for joint income exposes both the mother and the child to not only gender-based violence, but to violence against and anger against the children. And that has reproduced and produced itself over periods of time in the last 32 years. These are serious matters that we have to pierce with a sharp knife, with a sharp mind of Walter Sisulu and Albertina Sisulu, if the black child has to be liberated. Without that, we cannot. Without a sharp mind into our policy space of what liberation means and the means to achieve that liberation, we cannot ever, ever succeed. Part of the instruments of lack of success is this very issue of gender-based violence and violence against children, deep-rooted in its source, which is migratory labor, from Kolobe and Kutube, the homes of Walter Sisulu and Albertina Sisulu, where they migrated to Gauteng. When you look at those places, they are deserted, including Soweto. It's also very much deserted. It didn't bring any sense of ownership, any sense of accumulation, or at least retention of wealth. Instead, they became depleted. The question, therefore, that faces us today, that the president is putting before us, is 32 years later, what would have Walter said? And he says to us, in every one of us, there is a Walter Sisulu and there is an Albertina Sisulu. And that which is in us gives us hope that even in the darkest hour, in the darkest moment, it is still possible to say what would have Walter Sisulu and Albertina Sisulu said. He played a role of self-liquidating catalytic role. He liquidated himself in order to catalyze action. That's the foremost sacrifice anyone can do, to self-liquidate so that successive generations can actually grow and germinate out of his perishing. The collective purpose, the relations, the dignity to humanity, and the hope he inspired at all material times. Whenever he had to speak, he never forgot to say, give people hope. Even in the most hopeless of situations, it is important to give hope. But he didn't give me hope like in the song, Give Me Hope. No, he didn't. He didn't give you hope for you to say, even if you lie, tell me that you love me, even if you lie. No. He gave hope anchored in his commitment to what it takes to render and deliver on that hope. That's the promise that they made to Lembede, that hope will make them live and see freedom in their lifetime. As we face a very difficult situation as South Africa, particularly yourselves here in the academia, where in the 80s, in the 70s, for every one of you who would have gone to university, sponsored either by a church, sponsored either by your parents who would have owned a shop, sponsored by others and not the government of the time, each one of you would have had the same acceleration as your white counterparts. And you would finish your degree at record time of 3 to 4 years. Subsequently, as we sit today, where there was, for every one black person, there was 1.2 whites who would have succeeded. Today, the situation has degenerated so badly that for every one black person that succeeds, there are 6.2 whites. Not because blacks have got more stupid or whatever, but it is because of the disconnect between hope, policy, and action. Where you are asked, where instead of you being funded in full, you are asked the income, the joint income, should be able to be with you. The national purpose today is about nation building. The nitpicking as to who has joint income when actually the evidence is that there's nothing joint kills the nation building that Walter Sisulu said, non-racialism, and we should focus on non-racialism. When we focus on non-racialism, it must be possible. In fact, it must be imperative that everyone, white, black, colored, poor or rich, must be sponsored by the state. It shouldn't be a matter of saying we are only sponsoring the poor. No, you must sponsor everyone because the task of nation building is much bigger than poverty or riches. If we don't do that, then the Afrikaners will open their own universities and will further polarize ourselves into Orania and enclaves of privileged blacks who do the bidding for white capital. And that is the problem. I would argue for that everyone must be sponsored to achieve their highest levels. When you sponsor everyone, you encourage unity amongst the students. When you said fees must fall, you didn't say fees must fall for the poor or fees must fall for the rich. You said fees must fall for everyone. It is this that will create a different humanity that Walter and Albertina Sisulu yearned for. A united South Africa, taking its position in the world, taking its rightful position as a country amongst nations. That is what we need in this country. We have so much potential, so much at stake, yet so divided. In the work that I've done, probably in the footsteps and minimalist footsteps to try and anchor myself in the footsteps of Walter and Albertina Sisulu. It is clear that this country so rich has the potential of a gross domestic product of 21 trillion. Yes, 21 trillion. Yet greed has reduced it only to 7 trillion. This is the reality of this country, that instead of expanding the cake, we have constrained it to 7 trillion. It is a 21 trillion economy. And with 21 trillion, every other person must be able to achieve the capacity, the God-given talent that they have been granted to walk this world. It is the ultimate sacrifice. It is the ultimate reward that the Rivonia trialist, the Lembede, who died shortly after the 1944 session, it is the reward that we owe to those who sacrificed a lot before us. Here is the problem. When you assess Kolobe, and Kutube, and look at the wealth that is there, when you look at Soweto, the wealth and culture that could be there, you start realizing that if this were not siphoned, South Africa will be a different country. If Mpumalanga mines were not siphoned, Mpumalanga will be different. If Komati was not closed, which is closed now, under the rush of blood to the head by government to close Komati and leave people in misery, and nobody's going back there. The Presidential Commission on Climate has never gone back to Komati. When you read the report, you really say, who are these idiots that wrote this report? Who cannot account for the lives that have been destroyed at Komati? With that destruction of Komati for climate change, 66% of the people have lost their jobs, have lost their hope. 66% of them have lost hope in democracy. If we close all the other coal-fired power stations there, at the speed at which we want to do it, we will impugn Mpumalanga the same way. In the same way as instead of financing every child, every student, we start picking and saying, those who can afford, those who cannot afford. We start looking at joint. There's nothing joint. These are some of the things that you as students have to question. These are the things that we have to question in order to achieve the God-given wealth of this country to 21 trillion instead of the 7 trillion, which is 14 trillion, which is siphoned from Mpumalanga, siphoned from South Africa, and exhaled to the metropoles through our economic policies that look at mining and financial services as wealth or riches making. You see, the work that I've been doing suggests that 34% of the wealth must be retained where action is. 24%, an additional 24%, must be retained within the country. The rest, can be traded wherever we want to trade it in exchange. But what happens to Komati is that it retains 15%. Alexander retains 12%. No sooner has the money touched Alex than it has moved to Sandton before it exits the country. The 350 rand that was granted as distress fund increased the consumption of black people as a proportion of total consumption from 45% to 62%. But that increase meant profits for corporates that are unimaginable. No sooner has the 350 touched you than it has exited. What would Walter Sisulu say under those circumstances? These are the questions that President Motlanthe is asking us in talking about the legacy of Walter Sisulu. He must exist in each one of us. And as he exists in each one of us, we can continuously memorialize him in ourselves and indeed achieve a better life for all. Thank you very much.
I honestly don't think there's anything more to say. On behalf of the patron of the Walter and Albertina Sisulu Foundation for Social Justice, we would like to thank you for being a part of tonight. Dr. Lindiwe Sisulu had prepared a note for you, a few words for you, but you will receive those in your journal. Thank you so much for tonight, and thank you to our leadership, President Motlanthe. What an honor. Our much-loved statistician, South Africa. You know, each time you speak, I love my country more. Deputy Vice Chancellor, thank you so much. Bendithi ndizawuzama nam ndithi ndithetha isiXhosa kuyala. Vice Chancellor, thank you for having us. We're going to close tonight, please, with the incredible choir. I've fallen in love with the VUT choir. I'm going to take you wherever I go. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.